How do we start to keep our bodies healing and healthy by putting live foods in our bodies? Devitalized food is going to come in a package. It's going to come prepared. The more that we cook it, bake it, fry it, um, maybe even, what do you call it, prepare it, the more likely that we've destroyed a lot of the nutrients that are in that food. So eating live food as it's found in nature is one of the best ways to keep as many nutrients as possible. Now, for meats and proteins, that might be kind of tough, unless you know the quality of that. But that doesn't mean that you don't denature some of it. You do when you eat more cooked foods. But right now, I want you to just kind of think about how many things are packaged and processed in your diet today or throughout the day. How many prepared foods, how many of those foods that you find in the middle of the grocery store that don't need refrigeration are you consuming? Number one, those would be the first things when we talk about the laws of nourishment tonight that we should remove. We call a lot of those congesters. We won't always remove congesters from our bodies. This is candies and cereals and gums and sodas. Really, a lot of things made from flour are typically somewhat devitalized. You're talking about dried fruits, even jellies and jams, things like that can definitely be tough on us. Potatoes can even be in that category, and bananas, just because they're higher content of sugar and the abilities that they have to congest us a little bit. Those aren't bad things, but if you're looking at being really clean, those would be the first things of those healthier categories to remove. So congesters, let's remove them. And let's start to build our bodies. We need builders. One of the first groups that we want to talk about when it comes to the laws of nourishment are builders. So there are 4 groups. One is builders. Another is congesters, we just talked about. The second group is eliminators. We'll talk about those probably next month. That's our fruits and vegetables. And the fourth is our lubricators, or oils. If we go back to the laws of nature and we look at an animal in the wild, an animal in the wild doesn't necessarily set a timer to eat 3 times a day. An animal in the wild eats when it's hungry and doesn't eat when it's not. The food that it gets is raw. It's fresh. It's not prepared. We wonder why our pets are so sick. We'll just look at how we feed them, right? It's devitalized, most of it, right? And the chemicals that they're usually exposed to, those poor animals too. So if we look in the wild, an animal eats when it's hungry, doesn't eat when it's not. It eats raw, fresh foods. We, on the other hand, are animals, but we eat very differently. As we started to learn how to farm and what do you call that? Prepare foods that we could maintain and stay, that we've started to really be living outside of the laws and not in balance with the laws of our bodies. And as food was created to become addictive and more easy to get, our body's mechanisms of just staying alive kind of kick in, and then our dopamine centers kick in, and our bodies say, hey, I like that food, that tastes good. And sometimes that starts to feed some of our mind and spirit issues. When our body is not in balance in our mind, we can start to maybe numb it with food. But in the most basic sense, if we're talking really clean here, we need to make sure that when we're eating, one of the first things we do is eat builders. Builders are in the category of mostly animal flesh, but it could be avocados or builders, lima beans, kidney beans, navy beans. Butter can even be some of that a little bit, but it's also a lubricator. Cheese, eggs, fish, fowl, lamb, lentils, mushrooms are even in there, nuts. Those are builders. 1 builder a day is very important, at least at the minimum. Most people probably can handle and need 3 builders a day or 3 meals, a builder each meal. Building is pretty simple. Our bodies rely on collagen ultimately, but the protein we eat forms the backbones of our bones, our muscles. And if we don't have those things to build up our cells, then our cells are going to be somewhat sick and denatured. But the key is right now is to start to think about how and how much. We don't need to overdo the builders. If you overdo the builders, you will become more acidic. Your body will become probably more stiff and sore and maybe even more inflamed if you overdo builders. If I want to be a bodybuilder and I'm going to eat, 12 eggs at breakfast and, a pound of meat at lunch and then, finish it off with another pound of meat, it's very likely that my digestive system, number one, will be overloaded. It's very hard to digest protein. It takes work. We are built to digest it, but it takes work. This is why some people who just cut out meat and do vegetarian feel much better, because it is a lot easier to digest those things. But in the end, you need to make sure you're getting enough builders. Vegetarians might start to go on the other end where they don't have enough builders. Most of us probably can get enough protein, but it's about making sure we have the right quantity. About a fist size of protein a meal is usually sufficient, about 4 ounces for most people. And like I said, overdoing that could start to cause some challenges. And this is why we'll start to talk about the next time about eliminators. How do we detoxify our bodies? How do we alkalize our bodies? And then how do we lubricate them and ultimately minimize the congestion? So hopefully tonight was an opportunity to come back to the basics. There are laws that govern our bodies. If we live in disharmony, we will be diseased, right? We need to build our bodies with protein, ultimately protein. Protein sources, obviously fleshy meats, but it could be avocados, beans, lentils, mushrooms have some, nuts do as well. Not in the same concentration as flesh meats, not as easy to obtain, as much of that. But you don't need to overdo it. That's the other thing, is just to be careful. You don't need to overdo it. Some people are on diets. There's so many out there anymore. There's so many things going on that can just eat meat and they feel like they're doing quite well. They may be able to survive on that, but I would just be careful. The system, I think you'd be wanting some digestive enzymes. But our bodies really do cleanse well with vegetables and fruits. So not a big fan of just eliminating one category. We need them all, okay? The other point I want you to take home is that our spines and our structure tell us how we're living. If it's stiff and sore and achy and immobile, and I'm adjusting areas constantly throughout the process, it still is helpful, but it's still a secondary attempt. We're not at the root of the problem. I am rebooting you. As much as if your computer needs reboot every couple hours, you'd probably get a new computer. But if you can't get a new computer, you got to figure out how to debug it, right? And the ways to do that is starting to eat right, move right, and think right. So we're here to help you along with those things. But those 3 categories of traumas and toxins and thoughts, start thinking throughout your day. Maybe right now for you, you may have the ability to just say, at the end of the day, how much did I put a lot of trauma on my body? How about toxins? Did I expose myself to a lot of toxins? Or was I thinking in a toxic way? Or my thoughts really draining me in the other way? If there was one that just, that one was a lot. Well, that's the workshop you need to start coming to, right? And start listening to it, because your subconscious will start to make changes even without you doing the action right away. But our thoughts become things. And where we put focus, that's where our energy flows. So start focusing on our bodies. Start just even keeping a record every night about something. We'll talk about those as we go along probably. But this is step 1 of you making the next step for the rest of your life and doing the right steps every day. If you are someone who likes a challenge, if you're someone who likes to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to clean up my diet this year, and I'm going to do it for a couple of weeks really intensely. We're going to do a program in the office. So talk to me about the SHAPE program. The SHAPE program is a wonderful program that has, it heals your body with real food. It's anti-inflammatory. It is immune boosting. It's a detoxification, and it sheds excess weight. This program is wonderful. So if you're saying, well, how do I do it, Doc? I know you're talking about these builders, but you're going way too slow for me. Just give me the details. But do the SHAPE program with us. The whole team's going to start it next week on a Monday. The next month we'll be selling it. The only thing really that you take are drops. The drops help to get your mind and body in balance and decrease the amount of stress there is when you're changing your diet. If you're getting rid of coffee and sugars, your body's going to have withdrawal. Plain and simple. And these drops help that so that you can do what you need to without your mind telling you something like, oh, just stop, it's too hard. We don't want that for you. Okay. So ask us about the SHAPE program. We'll probably see more about that in emails.